They laughed at him, calling him just a waiter. But when the owner's daughter was about to sign away her family's inheritance to greedy hands, it was that same nobody who uncovered the truth that saved it all. The story you're about to hear proves that sometimes the lowest voice in the room carries the loudest truth. The August sun dipped low across Brookhaven, a small American town where the only building that carried weight on Main Street was the old Jefferson Inn. For generations, it had been a proud family-run place, oak-paneled walls, brass chandeliers dulled by time, and rooms filled with stories of travelers who once passed through the town's railway station. But by 2023, the Jefferson Inn was crumbling. Bookings had dropped, bills piled high, and the late owner's daughter, Emily Jefferson, sat in the manager's office with her head buried in her hands. Her father had died only a year earlier, and she had inherited both the inn's walls and its mounting debts. In the corner of the dining room, sweeping quietly and carrying trays without fanfare, was Darius Cole, a 22-year-old black waiter. He had worked there for only 6 months, but in those months, he had seen more than most of the managers noticed. Darius wasn't flashy. He didn't have pressed suits or polished shoes. His sneakers were scuffed, his apron patched at the pocket, and his voice soft, almost hesitant. To the wealthy guests and the senior staff, he was invisible. That suited him most of the time. Until that evening, "Are you an idiot or just clumsy?" barked Paul Whitaker, the inn's administrator, when Darius accidentally spilled a glass of water near the reception desk. The droplets barely touched the paperwork, but Paul exaggerated, waving his hands as though a flood had swept through. Darius muttered, "Sorry, sir. I'll clean it up right away." He reached for a towel. Emily, passing by, shook her head with a sigh. "Paul, it's just water. Don't make it bigger than it is." Paul forced a smile, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, ma'am, of course. The little accidents add up, and sometimes, little people create big problems." His glare cut straight through Darius. The young waiter lowered his eyes, biting his tongue. It wasn't the first insult he'd heard. Behind closed doors that evening, Emily sat with Paul and the inn's accountant, going over the numbers. The verdict was brutal. "The inn is sinking," Paul said bluntly, flipping through ledgers. "Bookings won't cover the next quarter's payments. If we don't sell now, the bank will take it." Emily's chest tightened. "This was my father's life's work. I can't just sell it off to some stranger." "That's your sentiment talking," Paul replied, leaning back in his chair. "I'm talking reality. You either sell now to a buyer I've lined up, or you lose everything to foreclosure. Choose which disgrace you prefer." Emily's eyes stung, but she said nothing. In the hallway outside, Darius had paused with his mop bucket. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but Paul's voice carried, and the words he heard made his stomach churn. Sell, foreclosure. None of it made sense, not with what Darius had seen. He knew for a fact that bookings had picked up. He was the one checking guests in, carrying their luggage, cleaning their rooms. He'd seen receipts. He'd watched families fill tables in the dining room on weekends. Just last week, he had helped a wedding party set up, and they'd paid thousands for the space. The numbers didn't line up with the doom Paul was painting. Still, who would believe him? He was just a waiter. Later that night, Darius sat alone in the staff lounge, staring at the cracked linoleum floor. His fists clenched. His late mother's words echoed in his head. "God gave you eyes to see and a voice to speak. Don't let fear choke one or blind the other." Maybe it was time to stop being invisible. When Emily passed through, looking exhausted, Darius stood and said, "Ma'am, forgive me if I'm out of line, but I don't think the numbers add up. Something's off." Emily paused, surprise flickering across her face. No one ever questioned Paul, let alone a waiter. "What do you mean?" "I see the guests. I carry the bills. I know this place has more money coming in than Paul's reports show." His voice trembled but didn't break. "If you give me a chance, I can prove it." Paul's footsteps echoed behind her just then, and Emily's expression hardened. "Darius, this isn't your concern," Paul snapped. "Stick to wiping tables." Emily hesitated, caught between authority and instinct. Darius's dark eyes held steady, not defiant, just earnest. For the first time, she wondered if the quiet young man saw something she didn't. She whispered, almost to herself, "What if he's right?" The next morning, the Jefferson Inn looked as tired as Emily felt. The shutters rattled in the early wind, and the neon sign outside flickered half-lit, buzzing like a dying fly. Inside, breakfast service stumbled along a few travelers sipping burnt coffee, a family of 4 arguing over waffles, a businessman barking into his phone. At the far end of the dining room, Emily sat with a stack of papers Paul had delivered. Her father's handwriting was still on some of the older ledgers, neat rows of numbers kept with stubborn pride. But the newer ones, Paul's reports, were messier, pages shuffled and overwritten, totals that never seemed to balance. Emily rubbed her temples. The weight of her father's legacy pressed on her chest like a stone. "You look tired, ma'am." She looked up. Darius stood there, tray balanced on one hand, the other clutching a pot of steaming coffee. His voice was careful, respectful, but there was something in his tone, concern that wasn't part of his job. Emily offered a weak smile. "Tired doesn't cover it. I feel like I'm holding a rope that keeps slipping. Darius poured her coffee, then hesitated before speaking. I know I don't have the right to say much, but I don't think Paul's being straight with you. Her brow furrowed. You keep saying that. Why? Darius glanced around the dining room, the passing guests, the staff who might be listening. Then he leaned closer. Because I've seen too much. The weddings, the banquets, the cash that comes through. I cleaned the drawer last week. The numbers don't match what he writes in those reports. Someone's bleeding this place dry, ma'am, and I don't think it's the guests. Emily's throat tightened. A stranger could have said those words, and she might have dismissed them. But something in the way Darius spoke, quiet, steady, like a man carrying his own scars, made her chest ache. Paul's voice cut across the room like a blade. Cole, stop bothering the owner and get back to work, unless you think your mop qualifies you to balance ledgers. Laughter from a couple of waitresses, nervous but real. The kind of laughter that sided with power, not truth. Darius lowered his eyes. Yes, sir. He turned to leave, but Emily called softly. Wait. She met Paul's gaze. He's not bothering me. I asked him. Paul froze, his jaw tightening. He gave a stiff nod and retreated, but his eyes lingered too long on Darius, promising trouble. Emily exhaled. Sit, she whispered, motioning to the chair opposite. Tell me what you know. Darius slid into the seat, his hands rough from scrubbing floors, gripping the table edge. For the next 15 minutes, he spoke with quiet precision about the wedding receipts, the overbooked weekends, the couples who tipped in cash. He even remembered dates, room numbers, little details that most staff never noticed. Emily listened, her stomach twisting with every revelation. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. Paul wasn't incompetent. He was stealing. When Darius finally stopped, his voice almost a whisper, Emily felt her throat tighten. Why are you telling me this? Most people would keep their head down. He swallowed hard. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything. My mom worked herself sick to keep our place when I was a kid. One day it was just gone, sold off behind her back. She never smiled the same after that. I see that same fight in your eyes, ma'am, and I don't want to watch history repeat. Emily blinked back tears. No one on her staff had ever spoken to her like that. Not with pity, not with calculation, but with sincerity. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. Darius, she hesitated, the name tasting unfamiliar on her tongue. If what you're saying is true, then Paul has been betraying me in my father's memory. But if I confront him without proof, her voice cracked. I'll look like a fool. Worse, he'll make sure I lose everything. Darius leaned forward, his gaze steady. Then let me find the proof. You've trusted the wrong man long enough. Trust me once. Emily searched his face, the young man most people dismissed as invisible. And yet, sitting there, she saw strength. Not in his uniform, not in his title, but in his eyes. Finally, she whispered, all right, tomorrow morning, meet me in the office. I'll give you access to the last 3 months of reports. Darius's breath caught, and for the first time, a faint smile touched his lips. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. As he left, Emily turned back to the ledgers, but her vision blurred. Her father's photograph sat on the desk, eyes forever frozen in quiet pride. She pressed a trembling hand against the frame. Daddy, she whispered, I hope I'm making the right choice. Outside the office door, Paul leaned in the shadows, his hand tightening around a pen until it snapped in two. His smile was thin, cold. The waiter thought he could play detective. Paul was going to make sure Darius Cole regretted ever opening his mouth. The morning light slanted through the lace curtains of the Jefferson Inn's office, dust motes dancing in the golden glow. Emily sat stiff behind her father's oak desk, the old wood smelling faintly of cedar and ink. In front of her, a stack of binders and folders sat like silent judges. Darius entered quietly, his uniform still damp from cleaning the breakfast hall, but his face composed sharper than she'd ever seen. You said you'd trust me, he reminded gently, his voice careful. Emily nodded, sliding the top folder toward him. 3 months of financial reports. Paul swears they're complete, her lips pressed thin. But I need to know for myself. Darius sat, rolling up his sleeves, his hands steady despite the storm brewing outside that office. He began scanning page after page, his finger tracing lines of numbers. Emily watched his eyes narrow, his brows pull tight. She leaned forward. What do you see? He tapped a line on the ledger. Room bookings. December says 40 occupied nights. He flipped another sheet from housekeeping logs, but the cleaning roster shows 86 rooms turned over. Either we've got ghosts staying here, or Paul is lying. Emily's stomach dropped. She reached for another page, comparing receipts against the bank slips. More inconsistencies, more gaps. This can't be real, she whispered. It's real, Darius said grimly. Look here, thousands in cash should have been deposited. Instead, the totals shrink, and then he balances it by writing false maintenance expenses. It's theft, plain and simple. The room was so quiet that Emily could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Each swing of the pendulum like a hammer striking down her father's legacy. Her throat tightened. He's been stealing from me all this time. Darius closed the folder, his hands folding over it. Not just from you, from your father's memory. From every worker who believed in this place, his eyes softened. From the town that trusted your family. Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, tears burning. For months, she'd believed she was failing, that she wasn't strong enough, smart enough. And all along, Paul had been carving pieces out of her future. A knock at the door shattered the silence. The knob turned before Emily could answer, and Paul strode in, his smile rehearsed, but his eyes sharp. "Busy morning?" he asked smoothly, glancing at the papers. "I trust everything's in order." Emily froze, her heartbeat skittering. Darius didn't flinch. He stood, the ledger still open on the desk between them. "Actually, sir," Darius said evenly, "it's not." Paul's smirk wavered. "Excuse me?" Darius gestured to the reports. "The bookings don't match the cleaning records. The cash flow doesn't match the receipts. This isn't bad math. It's fraud." Emily held her breath. Paul chuckled, low and dismissive. "Fraud. From a waiter, please." "Emily, you can't honestly believe this nonsense. He's a janitor with a calculator." Darius's voice rose, steady but firm. "I'm a senior accounting student, Paul. I know numbers like I know the back of my hand, and these numbers tell the truth you've been hiding." Emily's voice trembled. "Is it true, Paul? Did you?" Paul's expression hardened, the mask slipping, his smile turned thin as paper. "Careful, Emily. You're letting a kid with grease on his shoes fill your head with paranoia. You want this in, to survive? I'm the only one who can keep it afloat. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment." Darius stepped closer. "Or maybe you're afraid she see you for what you are." The air crackled with tension. Paul's eyes darted from Emily to Darius, then back to the folders on the desk. His jaw clenched. "Emily," Paul said softly, almost pleading now, "your father trusted me. I've been here longer than anyone. This boy is trying to turn you against me. Don't throw everything away chasing ghosts." Emily's hands trembled over the ledgers. Her heart pounded with the weight of choice. Trust the man who had stood by her family for years, or the waiter whose quiet courage stirred something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Darius's voice cut through her thoughts. "The question isn't whether you trust me, it's whether you trust the numbers. Numbers don't lie. People do." Paul's face darkened, the charm stripped away, leaving something raw and ugly. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "Both of you." He spun on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the windows rattled. Emily exhaled, tears slipping free. Her hands clenched the ledger until the knuckles whitened. "What have we done?" she whispered. Darius didn't answer. He simply rested a steady hand over the folder, grounding her. "We've started telling the truth, and that's the one thing men like him can't survive." The lobby of the Jefferson Inn had never felt so heavy. The chandeliers glowed faintly, their light gilded but weak, as though even the walls were holding their breath. Emily stood near the grand staircase, her hands twisting nervously at the hem of her blazer. Every instinct screamed that she was standing at the edge of something irreversible. Paul swept in like he owned the place, his tailored suit sharp, his smile rehearsed to perfection. Beside him walked a broad man with slicked hair and a gold watch that glinted under the lights. "Emily," Paul greeted, his tone smooth. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Delgado. He's prepared to buy the inn today for well above market value." Emily swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "Today? That's sudden." Delgado extended a hand, his ring sparkling. "I believe in moving fast, Miss Jefferson. Opportunities wait for no one, and from what Paul tells me, your situation requires urgency." Paul's hand pressed reassuringly to her shoulder. "This is the solution, Emily. No more debts, no more sleepless nights. Just freedom." But Emily's gaze flickered toward the back of the room, where Darius leaned against the doorframe, his uniform plain, his presence quiet but steady. Their eyes met, and something in his calm expression steadied her breath. Delgado drew a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the reception desk. "The contract. All that's left is your signature." Her hand hovered over the pen. "Just freedom." But Emily's gaze flickered toward the back of the room, where Darius leaned against the doorframe, his uniform plain, his presence quiet but steady. Their eyes met, and something in his calm expression steadied her breath. Delgado drew a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the reception desk. "The contract. All that's left is your signature." Her hand hovered over the pen. She could almost hear her father's voice echo in her mind. "Emily, the inn isn't just walls and ledgers. It's our family's heart. Don't let anyone strip it from you without a fight." Paul's voice cut in, smooth but insistent. "Sign, Emily. Do it now, before the bank takes it all." "Wait." Darius's voice carried across the hall, steady but sharp as steel. Paul's smile faltered. "You again? This doesn't concern you." Darius walked forward, carrying a folder of his own, worn at the edges but thick with papers. He set it down next to Delgado's pristine contract. "It concerns me because it concerns this, and because I won't stand by while you rob her blind." Delgado raised a brow. "And you are Darius Reed, waiter, janitor, dishwasher, whatever you want to call me." He met Emily's eyes. And a final-year accounting student who knows fraud when I see it. Paul scoffed, a brittle laugh. Emily, don't waste time with this nonsense. But Darius flipped open his folder, revealing spreadsheets, receipts, and copies of reservation logs. His voice rose with each word. December, you reported 40 occupied rooms. Actual cleaned rooms. 86 March. Cash deposits listed as 5,000. Receipts show 15. The missing 10? Disguised under maintenance costs. Over 3 months, nearly $30,000 vanished. Gasps rippled through the small crowd of staff who had gathered, drawn by the tension. Emily's face went pale, her hands trembling over the papers. Paul's composure cracked, his smile warping into a snarl. This is absurd. Fabrications from a meddling boy. Emily's voice shook, but it carried. Are they fabrications, Paul? Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't do this. Paul's jaw locked. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Delgado frowned, withdrawing his hand from the desk. You didn't mention irregularities, Paul. Darius turned to him. Irregularities. Try theft. He planned to sell this in cheap while bleeding it dry, then line his own pockets. He's not saving the inn. He's killing it. Paul's mask shattered. His voice lashed out, desperate. You don't know what it's like. Years of work, nothing to show for it. I deserved more than scraps, while this place withered. Emily's tears fell hot against her cheeks, but her voice was steel. You deserved trust, Paul. My father gave you that, and you betrayed it. Silence filled the hall. Even the chandelier lights seemed to burn brighter, as if demanding judgment. Delgado snapped his briefcase shut. I don't involve myself in scandals. Good day, he strode out, leaving Paul trembling with fury. Darius stepped closer to Emily, his voice soft but firm. Emily's tears fell hot against her cheeks, but her voice was steel. You deserved trust, Paul. My father gave you that, and you betrayed it. Silence filled the hall. Even the chandelier lights seemed to burn brighter, as if demanding judgment. Delgado snapped his briefcase shut. I don't involve myself in scandals. Good day, he strode out, leaving Paul trembling with fury. Darius stepped closer to Emily, his voice soft but firm. It's your choice now. Sign away your father's legacy, or fight for it. Emily lifted the pen again, but, instead of Delgado's contract, she scrawled her signature across a fresh document Darius had prepared, a formal request for an audit. She handed it to a waiting officer who had quietly entered after Darius's call. Paul's eyes widened. No, you can't. 2 officers stepped forward, hands firm on his arms. Paul Harrison, you're under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. As they led him away, Paul's protests echoed, bitter and hollow. You'll regret this. You'll lose everything without me. Emily stood straighter than she had in months, her hands no longer trembling. She turned to Darius, her voice soft but steady. I almost lost it all, until you reminded me what was worth fighting for. Darius offered the faintest smile. You didn't lose, you just took back what was always yours. And as the doors closed behind Paul, the Jefferson Inn finally felt lighter, as though her father's spirit still lingered, proud that his daughter had chosen truth over fear.